All right. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. Today I'm doing a spicy black bean kung pao chicken. That is a recipe that I wrote while I was working on hacking the Panda Express kung pao chicken, which I did a couple months ago, a while ago. That original recipe was for a recipe while I was hacking the Panda Express kung pao chicken, which has two different versions. So if you're interested, there's a recipe video that lives over on my YouTube channel. In that version, we did one version that was for hacking the Panda Express kung pao chicken, and the second version removes a lot of those Americanized qualities that come up in Panda Express's kung pao chicken, and then kind of takes a look at what kung pao chicken would look like without all of those American qualities, and it's kind of pretty interesting. That whole series, there's a whole series that we've been doing that's based on just reproducing Chinese American foods. So a lot of the stuff that we do over in that series is like Panda Express, PF Chang, stuff like that. And a lot of that series is just based on like taking a look at Chinese American food and then removing some of those American qualities and then seeing what it would look like if you were to reproduce a very, very like Americanized Chinese dish like kung pao chicken or General Tso's chicken, stuff like that. And see what it looks like without all of those American qualities. So if you're interested, there's a whole series going on over on the YouTube channel, so I would recommend bopping over to the YouTube channel and checking some of that stuff out. That's at youtube.com/WuCanCook. If you're watching on Reddit, that would be the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, that's the channel you're already on. So in addition to all of the recipe videos, that's also where the concurrent live stream lives. So in that live stream, there's a whole schedule of everything that I'm going to be cooking over the next couple of weeks. So if you were following these streams over on YouTube, you would have known that I would be cooking this kung pao chicken a couple weeks ago, I think I announced this, it was like in December, I think. So lots of fun stuff over on YouTube. If you're interested, I recommend hopping over to YouTube, checking some of that stuff out. So for today's kung pao chicken, the version that I'm going to be doing is loosely based off of the Panda Express version, but I'm going to be removing a whole bunch of things that kind of like make it Americanized. So essentially what I'm doing is removing a whole bunch of sugar from it and replacing it with a few things that kind of bring back some of that sugar, those sugary elements, without using just straight sugar. So what we're doing is removing about like, I think we're removing almost a quarter cup of brown sugar and then replacing it with a couple of things. The main things that we're replacing with black vinegar and fish sauce. I think those are the big two that we're going to be replacing. Oh, and hoisin sauce. So I've done this recipe on stream a few times, and I think like ultimately at the end of the day, what it results in is sort of like a similar tasting dish, but with like a little bit more complexity and flavor, and not just like straight sweetness. It's like yeah, just like a little bit more complex in flavor. The other thing that we're going to integrate today is the use of spicy black bean paste, which is this one, spicy black bean paste. So spicy black bean paste, if you're not familiar with it, is the primary ingredient in dajamian, which is Chinese black bean noodles. Probably one of my favorites. And we're going to be using a lot of spicy black bean paste today, which generally does not belong in a kung pao chicken. You definitely, most typically would not find spicy black bean paste in kung pao chicken. You generally don't find it in stir fries in general. Mostly in noodle dishes, I think, is where I mostly see it. But we're going to use it today in today's kung pao chicken, and I think it's going to give us a nice bit of extra umami, I think, is where it kind of takes the dish. So if you're interested, if you have any questions, feel free to drop your questions in the comments. I don't know everything about kung pao chicken or wok cooking or stir frying, or I don't know everything about anything. But I know lots of stuff, so hopefully I can be helpful or informative, or at the very least entertaining to watch. Alright, so as with most of my wok stir fry recipes, I'm starting off by crushing and mincing some garlic, followed by fine mincing some ginger. So the reason that we start with these two elements so frequently is because they tend to work very, very well as the core basis of umami. So when we're working in like the spectrum of building out layers of umami and like recipes that deal heavily in umami, garlic and ginger tend to be a good starting point for wok stir fries, and that's because it's sort of like fundamental layer of umami that we're going to start building on top of. So if you followed these streams before, you have probably seen me cut up and crush and mince some garlic and finely minced ginger at the beginning of almost every stream, probably, because pretty much every wok stir fry that I ever make deals very, very heavily in the use of umami. All right, so next up, we're moving on to our veggies. So in a Kung Pao chicken, you will find that Kung Pao chicken can have any different kind of, pretty much whatever vegetable that you happen to have on hand. I have used all different kinds of vegetables in my Kung Pao chickens. I know that the original version that I had written for this recipe in the YouTube version, I think this version uses, let's see, originally calls for celery and red bell pepper. And then I think the first Panda Express version that I had written calls for, let's look, red bell pepper and, yeah, bell pepper and zucchini. Oh, and then cashews, of course. Totally forgot the cashews. Before I forget to pull up these cashews. I think the real general ethos of a Kung Pao chicken is that it's really just about having some kind of vegetable element in it. I don't think there's necessarily one specific kind of vegetable that you have to have. I know that I have used celery in Kung Pao chicken quite a bit. Celery doesn't really taste like anything. It doesn't really have any nutritional value either. So it really just works as like a good filler element. I have also used onion in my Kung Pao chicken quite a bit. Really, it just ends up being like whatever vegetable I happen to have on hand. You can also use squash. Obviously, zucchini is a type of squash. So any of those things are going to work just fine. Use what you have at the end of the day. I think that's the general ethos of wok stir frying. I think the most important part about our vegetables today, though, is that they're all cut in the same general size and shape. That's because, especially in wok stir fryers, we want our veggies all in similar sizes and shapes so that they cook evenly. So this is very, very important with wok stir fries in general, is that when your vegetables are cut unevenly, they're eventually going to cook unevenly. So super important. If you want your veggies to cook evenly, you also have to cut them evenly. So that's our zucchini. Next up is a bell pepper. I believe the original recipe that I had written uses a red bell pepper. And I think the reason that I have used a red bell pepper is because the Panda Express, I think it's just because the Panda Express version uses a red bell pepper. I personally don't like red bell peppers all that much. I think that it's kind of bland. It doesn't really taste like anything. And the reason being is, so if you've ever shopped around and messed around with different types of bell pepper, or even if you've just looked at them at grocery stores, you'll notice that green bell peppers are probably the cheapest, red bell peppers are the next cheapest, and then it will be yellow and orange. And the reason for that is because the reason that they're different colors is because they're sold or they're picked at different times. So the brighter your bell pepper, the more ripened it is. So a green bell pepper, in this case, is not ripe at all. That's why green bell peppers are so bitter. So that's also the reason why they're so cheap too, is because they're not as ripened. So I don't like using red bell pepper if I can manage not to use it, just because I'd much rather use a yellow or an orange bell pepper, because I find, ooh, I'm lagging big time. Let's see if we can fix that. About fixing the lag time. How much lag do we have? Wi-Fi. See if this helps. All right, so that's my bell pepper. I like using orange bell pepper because I think it's nice and sweet. I find that red bell pepper is not nearly as sweet as a yellow or an orange bell pepper, but I find that it comes up in recipes quite a bit because of its color, so it gives a nice presentation. But I think that that's a poor reason to use a bell pepper. So I see red bell peppers come up in recipes that use Angus steak a lot, or anything that uses some kind of beef, and that's because I think it just contrasts really well it contrasts really well with the color of the beef. Keep stalling. Oh yeah, totally. Let's see if we can fix that. Alright, there's a little bit of a buffer now. Maybe that'll help. Travis, you're not noticing any stalls. Okay, well that's good. At least the YouTube. Truth teller. So for what it's worth, if you're interested in following along, I'm being told that the YouTube version or the YouTube stream is not lagging nearly as much as the Reddit version. So if you want to hop over to YouTube, that stream is working better. And that's the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen. So that's youtube.com/WooCanCook. So, oh, it's better now. Cool. Hopefully that I enabled a replay delay, so hopefully that helps. But if it's not working, though, definitely hop over to YouTube, or just hop over to YouTube in general. I've been told that it's easier to watch over there. So. All right, so for our next veggie, I'm cutting up in large dices some sweet white onion. I find that sweet white onion works really, really well in wok stir fries in general because it gives it a nice bit of brightness and crunch. So, but the trick about onions is a couple of things. So the first thing that we want to pay attention to is that I'm chopping these really, really large. So onions, if you're not careful, especially in relation to all of the other veggies that we just chopped, so bell peppers and zucchinis, those are two very, very hearty vegetables. So those two vegetables, when they go into a wok stir fry, because they're so hearty, they can withstand that wok heat really, really hard. So we can throw those in really, really early and then toss them even for a while. We could probably toss them for up to 5 minutes. And they will withstand that heat no problem. An onion, on the other hand, is very, very delicate. It's filled with water, which means that when we throw it into the wok, it's going to start shedding that water immediately. So if you're not careful, if you leave these onions in a wok for too long, they'll eventually just straight up disappear because it's mostly just water. So eventually they'll just evaporate and you won't have any onion in your stir fry. So in order to combat that, we're going to do a couple of things. The first thing that we're doing is chopping them really, really large. So again, they're in very similar shapes to our zucchinis. So similar shape and size. That's really important. We want those to be in similar sizes, and that's for your bite. So when you pick it up and put it on your fork or your chopstick, you want them in similar sizes when you eat it. And then the other thing that we're going to do is throw them in very, very late. I'm not going to throw these onions in until right before we pull it off heat. So maybe they'll be in the wok for maybe a minute, no more than that, I think. And that's because we don't want them to start disintegrating because they will eventually just straight up disappear into your stir fry if you're not careful. So, yeah, more bowls. So that's our onions. I'm going to set this aside, and then I think that's it for our veggies. There we go. Coming in hot, yeah. How's it going? What's up, everyone? All right. Let's do our sauce next. Hello to everyone just joining. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time tuning into these streams, we're streaming here every Tuesday and Thursday at 6:30 p.m. PST, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST, with new recipes that pop up over on YouTube every Friday. And sometimes there's an odd or random GIF recipe that will pop up over on the GIF recipe subreddit on occasion. Those don't happen super often, but I actually posted one today and people seem to be super stoked about it. So that GIF recipe was a part of another series that we've been doing that's entirely dedicated to reproducing foods from Chinese American classics. So lots of those things. The one that we posted on GIF recipe today was for a honey sesame chicken that's done with a tempura batter. That whole series is devoted to just reproducing foods from Chinese American cuisine. So a lot of foods from Panda Express, PF Chang, stuff like that, where I've been hacking those recipes and see what it looks like, what makes those recipes tick. So what makes Chinese American foods tick. And then a lot of those, generally in those recipes, I'll deconstruct it and take it apart, and I'll do a second version that removes a lot of those American qualities and takes a look at what Chinese American food would look like if it wasn't so American. So that's really interesting, especially with dishes like Kung Pao chicken or General Tso's chicken, honey sesame chicken, because none of those foods are, well, maybe not Kung Pao chicken is actually rooted in a lot of traditional Chinese food, but especially like honey sesame chicken, stuff like that, all of those things are not really Chinese at all. There's not really much like Chinese cuisine in there. That's really just American food. So it's really interesting to deconstruct Chinese American food like that, because it kind of like removes all of those American qualities, and then a lot of times what I'll do is I'll reassemble it and see what it looks like if I were to reassemble it as if it were traditional Chinese food. So lots of times in those recipes I'll find myself removing a whole bunch of sugar, and then I'll reassemble it using things that are like sweet or sweet adjacent, but not just like straight sweet. So in this Kung Pao chicken that we're doing today is a part of that series. And what I'm doing is I think I'm removing like almost a quarter cup of sugar from this recipe. Yeah, quarter cup of sugar, almost a quarter cup of sugar that I'm removing. And then I'm going to replace it with a couple of things. So we're going to replace that sweetness with a few things. We're going to use black vinegar fish sauce, a tiny bit of brown sugar, so like half a tablespoon of brown sugar, and then a little bit of hoisin sauce and Shaoxing wine. All of those things have quite a bit of sweetness in it. So what that's doing is replacing that huge amount of sugar that comes in like Chinese American foods, and then gives it a little bit more complexity and depth of flavor that you wouldn't normally find in like really straight ahead Chinese American foods. So that whole recipe, or all of those recipes, as with pretty much everything that I cook on stream, that lives over on the YouTube channel. So if you're watching on Reddit, that would be the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, you're already there. You did it. Good job. Cool. Nice feed. Yeah, thanks, Meryl. So yeah, totally. So if you're interested in stuff like that, I recommend hopping over to YouTube. In addition to all of the recipes, that's where the concurrent live stream also lives too. I'm also being told that it's not lagging as much. Maybe it sounds like we fixed the Reddit lag. But if it is lagging, definitely hop over to YouTube and check that out too. Okay. Let's do this. So moving on, I'm going to start assembling my sauce here. So in my wok stir fries, a lot of times you will find that I love assembling. Almost in every recipe that I do, I will assemble, even in some of the soups, which when I don't necessarily need to be doing this, I find myself doing it anyway. I love assembling my sauces off heat, and that's because it gives you a nice opportunity to kind of take a look and like taste what your ultimate stir fry is going to end up tasting like. So in a lot of like restaurants, if you've ever watched like restaurant videos, you will see them doing this stuff straight into the wok. And that's because they make the same thing like over and over and over again. They probably make it 10, 15, 20 times a day. So since we're not as familiar with a dish as those restaurants or street food chefs are, I love assembling it off heat so that we can stop before it gets to the wok heat and taste it. What does it taste like? Does it need something? Does it need salt? Does it need more soy sauce? Does it need more brightness? What does it need? And if it needs something, then we can add it. But if we're doing it straight into the wok, you don't really have a chance to taste it, especially if you're working with like raw chicken or something, because you can't really taste anything once something's in the wok. So if you're super new to a recipe that you're doing in a wok, I highly recommend assembling your sauces off heat first. Oh, classic American dishes with Chinese twist. Yeah, totally. So that's actually, every Friday there's a new recipe that comes out, Travis. And that would be, so tomorrow actually, yeah, that's coming up tomorrow. We're doing Korean gochujang glazed Korean fried chicken. That's actually the Korean fried chicken from Shake Shack that I tried to replicate. That's actually coming out tomorrow. I'm super stoked for it because lots of people have been asking me to do a Korean fried chicken. So when I saw that Shake Shack had just come out with a Korean fried chicken sandwich, I just kind of used it as an opportunity to make Korean fried chicken. And it came out really, really good. It's like honestly one of the best fried chickens that I've ever made because it's covered in gochujang and it's like really, really tasty. So. That's actually really timely of you, Travis. So that is actually coming out tomorrow. Korean fried chicken it's basically a Korean fried chicken sandwich. So, and it's going to be really, really good, served with crinkle cut fries. So I've probably been doing too much deep frying lately. It's probably not healthy. So for our sauce, that was 4 tablespoons of soy sauce, 2 tablespoons of fish sauce, 2 tablespoons of black vinegar, and next up is going to be 2 tablespoons of black bean sauce. So if you've never heard of black bean sauce before, black bean sauce is the primary ingredient in the Chinese noodle dish called dajangmian. Dajangmian is sort of I guess you could think of it as like Chinese bolognese, I guess, something like that, kind of. it is not something that you would traditionally find in a Kung Pao chicken. So if you're keeping tabs on like what makes sense in a Kung Pao chicken and what doesn't, this is the thing. This is probably the main thing that doesn't make any sense to belong in a Kung Pao chicken, but it works really well because it gives black bean paste is packed with like everything. Black bean paste is like amplified up to 11. It's like it's packed with so much flavor. So what that also means is that you want to use this stuff very, very sparingly because it will immediately overpower whatever it is that you're cooking if you're not careful. But if you just, so I used, that was, it should be probably like about 2 tablespoons. That was more like 3 teaspoons, maybe a little more than 3 teaspoons. But what we're really looking for is 2 tablespoons. I don't know why I just used a teaspoon. All right. Next up is the only sugar that goes in this whole recipe, and that's in a single tablespoon of brown sugar. And there's not a lot that we're going to derive from that. That's pretty much just straight sweetness. I guess brown sugar has a little bit of a molasses flavor to it. I love using, when I do use sugar in Chinese recipes, I find myself using brown sugar very, very frequently because it creates like a little bit more complexity than straight white sugar. Why do American imitations use so much sugar? Yeah, that's like, I think that's like the quality that like Americans love. Americans love a couple of things. I think the first thing that they love is sweet stuff. The other thing that they love are things that are filled with sauce. So there's this like misnomer that Chinese food is extremely sauce heavy, but it's not really that sauce heavy. I mean, Chinese food has lots of sauces in it, but it's definitely not like the predominant flavor. It's just like a quality that comes out in Chinese food quite a bit. But it's definitely not super, super overwhelming in the way that you often find it in Chinese food. Cool, yeah. But yeah, definitely, I don't know why Chinese American food has so much sugar, and I think it's just like the way that like Chinese food was adapted to kind of like make sense or be like interesting to the American palate. So that to me is super, super interesting. Is like kind of what happened to Chinese food when it came to America, why all these things. So like a lot of the series that these recipes come from are inspired by a documentary on Netflix that's called The Search for General Tso, and in that documentary, what they essentially do is kind of like trace back where the recipe for General Tso's chicken comes from, and a lot of times what you find is like a lot of like the original like early Chinese American foods. It comes from like Chinese food in the American Midwest, and essentially what's happening is they're serving that Chinese food in diners next to like donuts and hamburgers and stuff. So I'm guessing maybe a lot of that sweetness comes from the fact that it's being served with donuts and stuff. Yeah, it's tropical. You're cute too. All right, so today I'm using, this is chicken thigh. I believe in the original I used chicken thigh too. But definitely I have noticed that every time that I reproduce a Panda Express or a PF Chang's or really like any commercially produced chicken recipe, I see the use of chicken breast all the time. And I think I have a couple of theories as to why I see chicken breast used so often. Definitely in the deep fried dishes, like honey sesame chicken or General Tso's chicken, stuff like that. I think that you see chicken breast come up a lot, and I think that maybe a good reasoning behind that might be because chicken breast has less fat, so it's leaner, which means that it sheds less moisture in the deep fry. And if it sheds less moisture, then you hypothetically have a pathway to getting a crispier fried chicken. I don't think that's the reason why they use chicken breast so much. I think that's like a good reason to do it, and I've tested this theory out many times. I've tried deep frying different types of fried chicken all the time, and I ultimately have discovered it doesn't really make a difference. You could deep fry either of them, and it's gonna turn out pretty similar. I think the real reason that in like Panda Express and PF Chang's recipes that you see the use of chicken breast so often is because of marketing. I think that they're using chicken breast so that people will think that it's healthy, which it's obviously it's not. Chinese food is never healthy. So I think like anytime that you can, I would recommend using chicken thigh, unless you're doing something that's very, very heavy. So yesterday we did a pad see ew and I used chicken breast. And even then, I kind of missed some of the fat from the chicken breast, from the chicken thigh. But essentially what's happening is chicken thigh, what we're using today, comes from the dark meat of a chicken, so it comes from the thigh, which means two things. So it means that it has dark meat, and the other thing that it means is that it has more fat. So it has all of this white fat coming off of the meat. That means that it has more flavor, so it has more depth of flavor. There's more stuff going on with your chicken. Chicken breast, on the other hand, has less fat and less sodium in it. So hypothetically speaking, you can make the argument that chicken breast is technically healthier for you. But in the grand scheme of things, with all of the things that we're doing, none of it's that healthy anyway. So I think that's a silly argument. So pretty much in almost every wok stir fry that I make now, I probably lean towards using chicken thigh more often than not. So. I wonder if the Chinese cuisine's adapted in other cultures. Yeah, I kind of noticed that when I was looking into like Indian food. I find that like Indian food uses a lot of sugar in like American adaptations. Oh, Thai food too. So like pad Thai, Americanized pad Thai uses a lot of sugar. And that is not what pad Thai is supposed to taste like. Pad Thai does have sugar in it, so it has a lot of fish sauce in it. So it is sweet, but it is not nearly as sweet as like most of the Americanized versions of pad Thai that I come across. So I find that like super interesting. It's like why so much sugar? I don't understand. You know. Alright, so next up I'm doing a quick marinade, so nothing too complex on our marinade here, but we do want to impart a bit of depth of flavor on our chicken, so that's 4 tablespoons of soy sauce, followed by 2 tablespoons of Shaoxing wine. Shaoxing wine, if you can't find it, is really essentially just dry cooking sherry. So if you can find dry cooking sherry, pretty much everyone in America, I think you can get your hands on dry cooking sherry. But if you can't find either, I found that like a bit of vinegar plus a tiny bit of like sugar works really well. Or if you can't even get vinegar, even then I might even say use white wine will work too, and it will work out pretty well. Am I married? No, I'm not married. Thank you for asking. Alright, so next up, this is going to be 1 tablespoon of toasted sesame oil. Sesame oil is very pungent. So when you do use sesame oil in your recipes, use it very sparingly because that stuff will overpower very quickly. And then next up is 2 tablespoons of hoisin sauce. I find myself using hoisin sauce in like almost every Chinese American dish. I think like the use of hoisin sauce comes across like almost all Chinese American food because it has so much sugar in it. But it does work really well in marinades. So I try not to overuse it because it is super sweet and overpowering. Alright, so the last two things actually that we're going to add is a tiny bit of white pepper, so that's maybe quarter teaspoon of white pepper. Plus just a pinch of kosher salt. Actually, one more thing. Sorry, we're going to add one more thing. And the last thing that I'm going to add is a really small amount of cornstarch. So and when I say really small, I mean like a really small amount, like a pinch of cornstarch. And cornstarch is super useful in marinades because what happens is it's going to coat our meat. And you will find the use of cornstarch in a lot of marinades, even a lot of eggs, or wok fried eggs. Pretty much any time you throw in protein into a wok, you find the use of cornstarch quite a bit. And that's because it protects the meat from overcooking. So you can coat your chicken in cornstarch with just a tiny little bit of cornstarch. And it's going to prevent that meat from turning really rubbery. That's because wok heat is very hot, and if you have too much heat in your wok, or if you have too much heat on a piece of chicken, it will eventually overcook. So the exterior will get really rubbery before the interior of the meat has a chance to fully cook. So if we add a tiny little bit of cornstarch, it prevents it from getting too rubbery. So super important. If you've ever come across like wok stir fries where it has chicken and it's super tender but also really crispy, or like really nicely seared or crisped on the exterior, that's coming from the use of cornstarch. So cornstarch comes up in, I think like cornstarch is in like 90 to 95% of all Chinese food, I think. A very, very critical element. So that's my marinade. We're gonna set this aside. If you're really committed, that should marinate for at least 30 minutes. It's not gonna marinate for 30 minutes. It's probably gonna marinate for maybe 5-10 minutes. But if you're really committed, I could even go for at least an hour. Wipe you up, yeah, totally. All right, and then the very last thing that I'm going to assemble while we're on the topic of cornstarch is a quick cornstarch slurry. So the cornstarch slurry comes up in a lot of Chinese food, and pretty much any Chinese food that has sauce in it. And that's because cornstarch is sort of the element that we use in Chinese sautés to thicken sauces up. So it reminds me a lot of the use of pasta water the pasta water that comes up in Italian food. So in Italian cuisine, we use pasta water quite a bit, and that's essentially using the starch that is shed from a pasta noodle in the water that you cook the pasta in, and in that starch, we use that starch to thicken up sauces. So you will use pasta water in things like carbonaras, Alfredo sauces, bologneses, pretty much any pasta is using that pasta water to create really, really thick sauces. So in Chinese sautés, or really any wok sauté, we do a very similar thing, but instead of using pasta water and the starch from pasta water, we use cornstarch. If you didn't notice, the amount of water that we use is not super important. Really what we're after and what we're paying attention to is making sure that our cornstarch is dissolved into a liquid form. So super important when you use cornstarch in wok stir fries is that you want to make sure that there's no solids left in your cornstarch. If you have solids in your cornstarch, you're going to have solids in your wok stir fry, which I have made the mistake of doing so many times that it's so frustrating. I have lost track at least 24 times where I have ruined a dish because I didn't dissolve the cornstarch properly. So if you're not careful, cornstarch will literally clump up with anything that is not liquid. So it will clump up with honey, it will clump up with gochujang, doubanjiang, it will clump up even in some alcohols, soy sauce, it will clump up in all of those things. So really the only thing that you want to dissolve your cornstarch in is just water. Don't throw it in your sauces, don't throw it straight into the wok. Dissolve it in just water and make sure it's cold water. It has to be cold water. If it's hot water, it will absolutely start turning into gloop. So be very careful with this stuff. Make sure that it's fully dissolved before you drop it into your wok, where you're going to have a bad time. Yeah, cornstarch is your new best friend. If you're into wok cooking, cornstarch is probably the thing that you're going to be using in like 90 to 95% of all of your wok stir fries, I think. Are we upside down? I think we're upside down on YouTube. Let me flip this over. There we go. That was weird. I don't know why the camera was upside down. Can I cook one day General Tso's chicken? Yeah. Diamond Guy, I think we did General Tso's chicken maybe a couple weeks ago, but I will definitely put it in the schedule. Probably sometime in early February. I'll make it the next thing that I cook. So if you're paying attention to the schedule, it will be the next thing that I drop in the schedule for sure. That reminds me, if you have any requests for things that you want me to cook, or if you're generally just perusing the things that I have done recipes for, and you want to see me cook it, definitely take a look at the list of all the things that I know how to cook and make a request, and I'll definitely put it in the books. So I guess that reminds me, I should keep introducing myself. Hello to everyone just joining. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time tuning into these streams, we're here streaming every Tuesday and Thursday at 6:30 p.m. PST, and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST, so Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And every Friday, there's a new recipe that comes up over on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/woocancook. So if you're watching on Reddit, that would be the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, it's the channel that you're already on. Over on that YouTube channel, that's where all of the recipes live for everything that I cook. So Pretty much everything that I cook on live stream has a recipe video that goes along with it. So essentially what I'm doing on live stream is just cooking my way through all of the recipes that I've written. A lot of those recipes, almost all of those recipes, are some derivation of a food or a dish that I used to grow up, or I grew up eating all of the time. So last week we did, what was the last recipe I did? We did a mushu pork, which was from my mom's cookbook. Today, actually just today, I released a honey sesame chicken that comes from the Panda Express cookbook. All of those things, those all live over on the YouTube channel. So if you're interested in cooking stuff yourself, I recommend hopping over to YouTube and checking some of that stuff out. There's a whole series that's dedicated to just reproducing Chinese American foods from places like Panda Express, PF Chang, stuff like that. That happens to be one of the recipes that we're doing today. So the recipe we're doing today is for a Kung Pao chicken that is loosely based off of, or at least originally inspired by, the Kung Pao chicken from Panda Express. That was a recipe video that I had released back in November or so. And in that recipe, I did one version which essentially deconstructed Panda Express's Kung Pao chicken, kind of took a look at what are like the Americanized qualities of Panda Express's Kung Pao chicken, and then removed those American qualities. And in those Chinese American recipes, a lot of the time what I'll do is reassemble it without all of those American qualities, and see what a recipe like, or a dish like that would look like if you pull out all of those American qualities and replace them with like authentic Chinese ingredients. So the version that we're doing today is loosely based off of that Panda Express version, but it replaces a lot of those American things. So essentially what we're doing is pulling out a whole bunch of sugar and like sauce qualities and replacing them with things that come from Chinese cuisine. So we're replacing it with black vinegar, fish sauce, brown sugar, a little bit of brown sugar, Shaoxing wine, hoisin sauce, stuff like that. All of those things come from Chinese cuisine. And what it's going to do is create like a similar like ethos of the dish, but it's like developing a more complexity to that sweetness. That's not just like straight ahead sugar. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely hop over to the YouTube and check some of that stuff out. We're also concurrently live streaming too, so I know that Diamond Gal just asked about General Tso's chicken. So over on YouTube, that's also where the schedule of everything that I cook lives. So if you're interested and want to find out what I'm going to be cooking next, definitely hop over to YouTube, check out the schedule, and all of that stuff lives over on YouTube. String bean chicken, yeah. Mohammed, yeah, definitely Panda Express string bean chicken. I'll put it in the books. I'll have to figure out how to do that. Alright, so if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely hop over to YouTube, check some of that stuff out. We're working our way to 1,500, well, we were working our way to 1,500 subscribers by the end of the month. We're way past 1,500 at this point. But if you want to help us keep going, we're probably going to aim for 2,000 by the end of February. Maybe a little over 2,000, probably around 2,000 for February. So if you want to help us hit 2,000 by the end of February, definitely hop over to YouTube, check some of that stuff out. Alright, so over on the stove I have my wok. This has been preheating for quite a while now. So we have a very, very hot wok, and I'm going to start adding cold oil. So this is peanut oil that I'm adding first, and we're adding it to our wok and giving it a swirl. So in Chinese cooking we call this a a long yao. And what that's doing is essentially creating a nice non-stick surface on our wok. If you don't remember to add the oil, heat the wok before adding the oil, what essentially is going to happen is you're going to have stuff stuck to your wok all the time, which is never ever fun. This. So I'm starting off with my garlic and ginger. We call these aromatics for the specific reason that they are aromatic. And then we're going to bloom these until you begin to smell them. So we're looking for, you want to use your nose at this point. And saute it just long enough until you start smelling it. When you start smelling garlic and ginger, you're ready to go. All right, next up, I'm adding my chicken to the wok, but you may notice that I am being very careful to hold back as much of the liquid from my marinade as possible. That is very intentional. We don't want to add too much moisture to our wok. So as much as we can, or as best you can, reserve that liquid in your marinade to reduce the moisture in your wok as much as possible. You will find that reducing moisture in your wok is a common and recurring theme that comes up in wok cooking all the time, and that's because in wok cooking, the ultimate goal of wok cooking is just essentially constantly at a in an effort to retain as much high heat in your wok as humanly possible. So the more liquid that's in your wok, the more trouble you're going to have keeping your wok hot. So the drier the drier that your wok is, the more easy it will be making sure that your wok stays nice and hot. So I'm going to let this go for maybe 2-3 minutes. We don't need it to be fully cooked, but we do need it to be mostly cooked. So we want to pay attention here. Keep your eye on your chicken. Make sure that it doesn't overcook, but also we're looking for mostly a flash cooked chicken. So it only needs to be about 80 to 90% cooked through before we move on. Ooh, 4 minutes, yeah, totally. So, hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley, this is Wu Can Cook. I think we have about 4 minutes left on the Reddit stream. We're kind of close to being done. I'm not sure if I'm going to restart the stream or not, but if I do lose you, the YouTube stream will continue, so if you want to keep watching, definitely hop over to the YouTube stream and check that out. If you're watching on Reddit, the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen, which would be youtube.com/WuCanCook. So, flame ups, they're always super fun. Flame ups are really, really fancy. A flame up is any time that you see flame popping up in your wok. They're fun and like flashy, but if you do see that happen in wok cooking, it's probably not a good thing. If your wok is flaming up, what it essentially means is that you have moisture building up in your wok and it is combining with the oil. Water plus oil creates fire, so it makes flames burn. And essentially what that flame is doing is burning off that water. You probably don't want to see that happen. Unless you have a lot of heat in your wok, so you probably see it in restaurant cooking all the time because they have huge amounts of heat. If you see that happening in your home range, it means that you have too much moisture in your wok and you probably has done something wrong. So in our case, it doesn't seem to be coming up anymore, but what it's essentially meaning is that there was too much moisture in our wok. So pay attention. If you start seeing that happen, you have probably incorporated too much moisture. And when you start seeing flame ups happen in your wok, what that's an indicator is that your wok is starting to shed heat, so that's not good. All right, so our chicken is just about there. I'm going to give it maybe another 20-30 seconds, and that should be there. And then what we're going to do is employ a technique that comes up in wok cooking all the time, which is called batch cooking. Essentially what I'm going to do is remove that chicken from the wok, then rinse our wok out, and continue cooking our next ingredients. So batch cooking is super, super important in home cooking on a wok, because in a home range, you don't have the same amount of heat potential that restaurants and street food cooking does. So because your home range doesn't get hot enough, lots of people think that since your wok won't get hot enough, that you can't cook on a wok at a home range, which is absolutely not true. What it does mean, though, is that we have to approach wok cooking slightly different. So, more specifically, what we're going to do is remove everything from the wok, and then rinse it down, and then do everything all over again. This process is super, super important because by making sure that there's no point, essentially what we're doing is making sure that there's no point at time where everything is in the wok while it's still cooking. So. By making sure that our wok stays mostly empty for the duration of time where we're cooking stuff, what's going to happen is that we're going to be able to retain a whole lot more heat than if we were to start just dropping things into the wok one after another. And that's what will happen. That's essentially what's happening if you've ever had a wok stir fry and it's like really, really like soupy or like kind of porridgey. That's because there's not enough moisture in the wok. So that's what's happening is your wok home range on your wok is not hot enough to keep the wok really, really hot. So what's happening is the wok's temperature is dropping all the time. So if we were to leave everything in and then add our, say our zucchini to the wok, by the time that zucchini was ready to or cooked, you would have a very, very mushy zucchini, which is not what we're after. What we're looking for is like a crispy vegetable. So in order to get to that like really crispy wok fried veggie, we pull everything out of the wok and then cook our veggies on an empty wok. So by making the wok empty, we can flash fry our veggies in really, really high heat without getting into that territory of like porridgey wok stir fries. So I'm reheating our wok right now. That will probably take maybe another 45 seconds or so, and then we can start with our next elements. Ooh, 20 seconds. I think we're about to lose Reddit. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm probably gonna restart the stream. So if I lose you, definitely just hop over to YouTube and we have the stream going, or it's gonna keep going. If I do lose you, you could probably find the reboot because I'm probably just gonna restart it. So. But if not though, thank you everyone for tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. Definitely hop over to the YouTube channel. Check out the recipe for this too. That's youtube.com/WuCanCook. All right, let's restart this. Okay, so our wok is nice and hot. I'd like it to be a little bit hotter. If you're not sure if your wok is hot enough, what we're looking for when we're heating our wok is all of that smoke. So I think you can see it. Yeah, you can mostly see it. There's a little bit of smoke starting to pop up, but what I really want to see is a lot of smoke really billowing out. And that's the same reason why when you cook on a wok, you want to make sure your windows are open, because what we're looking for is all of that smoke. The smoke is a sign that you have enough heat in your wok. All right, so let's pop back over here and I'm going to show you. So for our second set of veggies, I'm going to do a couple of things here. Well, these technically aren't veggies. I'm going to add two things. So these are Tianjin peppers. These are actually Japanese peppers, maybe? I forget. But if they're not Tianjin peppers, they're very similar to Tianjin peppers. Essentially what they are dried chili peppers. These are not edible, so when you see these in your dish, don't try and eat them. They're not edible. They're just for flavor. They're kind of like when you see a bay leaf in pasta. It's there to impart, especially aromatic flavor. It's kind of like leaching out flavor from the Tianjin. But they're not edible. They're definitely not chewable, so don't try and eat these. But what we can do when we see these come up a lot, they definitely come up. This is probably the most iconic part of a Kung Pao chicken are the Tianjin peppers. What we're going to do is throw these into our wok very, very first. So this is also super important in wok frying. The same reason why it's so important to use batch cooking in this case is because when you use Tianjin peppers, they absolutely have to go in very, very first. And that's because they need to make contact with that oil in order to bloom out all of their aromatic flavor. If they don't make contact with that oil, they're not going to taste like anything. They're just going to be like dried peppers that are stuck randomly into your saute. So in order to make sure that you derive any kind of flavor at all from your Tianjin peppers, they have to go in first. So they have to make nice solid contact with that hot oil. If they don't make contact with the hot oil, it's not going to taste like anything. And then the second thing that we're going to be using are cashews. So, yeah. Do we have enough cashews? Yeah, we're gonna have weird amounts of cashews. Cashews, super, super important. Another thing that I love adding very, very early, especially if you're using raw cashews. These are not raw cashews, but if you are using raw cashews, I love adding them really, really early because you can add them to the wok heat very, very early, and it gives you a nice crisp cashew. So if you've ever had a Kung Pao chicken and you come across a cashew and it's kind of chewy or not very toothsome, sort of like a soggy peanut or a soggy cashew, that's because they're added too late, and then they're basically just it turns into a boiled peanut because it's basically just boiling in the wok heat and the residual heat. So when I use cashews or peanuts or any time that I use nuts that come up in a wok stir fry, I love adding them really, really early and then hitting them really, really hard with that flash cook in the really aggressive wok heat. So let's do it. All right, back over on the stove. I have my wok. It has been preheating again for quite a while now. This is nice and hot. If you're ever not sure if your wok is hot enough, the one thing that I love doing, or one way I love testing if my wok is hot enough, is we're going to add our oil to the wok. We're going to do our long yao, and then most commonly in Chinese cooking, you'll probably see this done with chopsticks because Chinese people cook with chopsticks. But we're adding a wooden utensil or any kind of wooden utensil and stick it into that oil. If you start seeing bubbles coming off of your oil or around your spoon, I think you can see it. Yeah, you can. That's a sign that you have not a lot of nice hot heat in your wok. If you don't see those bubbles coming up, you don't have enough heat, and you should stop doing what you're doing until you do so see bubbles popping up. Delicious. What kind of oil do I use? Today I'm actually using peanut oil. So peanut oil is probably like the most common kind of oil that you see in wok stir fries. And I think the only real reason that I'm using peanut oil today is because I ran out of grapeseed oil. So I had to run down the street and I live in Chinatown, so I had to run down the street to the grocery store in Chinatown and pick up some oil. And the Chinatown grocery stores have weird looking, sketchy looking canola oil, so I don't buy their canola oil. And that, I think the reason that I have the canola oil so sketchy is because I think they only use it for deep frying. And that's because like wok stir frying most commonly happens in peanut oil. But most commonly, I almost always, like on almost every other stream, I'm probably using grapeseed oil. And that's just because grapeseed oil is cheaper, mostly. You could get grapeseed oil for really, really cheap. But really, any kind of neutral oil will work. So grapeseed oil, vegetable oil, canola oil, all of those, anything that's neutral and has high heat potential will work. The main things that we want to avoid are things like olive oil, which is not neutral and has a very low smoke point, which means that it's going to start smoking at a very low heat. And that's essentially what's going to happen is it's going to start burning. So we don't want to use olive oil. Really, the only thing I use olive oil for is Italian food. Good question though, yeah. But today this is peanut oil. I will say though, if you're going to keep one kind of oil in your house, peanut oil probably shouldn't be it, because peanut oil is also not great if you're not cooking in a wok. So if you're like scrambling eggs or you're making hash browns or something, and you need high heat oil, but you don't want it to taste like peanut, peanut oil is not going to be really great because peanut oil is not neutral. It is very much biased towards the flavor of peanut. So that works really well for wok stir fries because it's fine if you impart a little bit of peanut flavor. But everywhere else, so if you're making hash browns and you don't want your hash browns to taste like peanut, peanut oil is not a good solution. So if you're only going to have one kind of oil in your house, it probably shouldn't be peanut oil. It should be maybe canola oil or vegetable oil. If you're going to have two oils, I would say peanut oil is probably my favorite thing to keep around. And the third thing, probably olive oil. Probably a toss-up between peanut and olive oil. All right, so we have nice hot heat in our wok, and I'm tossing in my peppers first, followed by my cashews. Actually, let's just use the rest of these up. There's a little bit too much particulate going on. All right, then I'm following immediately with my zucchini. And where's my bell? There it is. My bell pepper. We're giving this a toss. Both of the veggies that we just added, so the zucchini and the bell pepper, are very, very hardy veggies. So they can absolutely withstand all of that wok heat. You will notice that the one thing that I have not added yet, though, are our onions. So we want to hold back these onions as much as possible because those onions are going to come together really, really fast. So we're only going to give those onions maybe about a minute or maybe 2 minutes in our wok heat before we pull everything out. All right. Hello to everyone just joining. My name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. Today we're doing a Kung Pao chicken that's loosely based off of a recipe that I had written while I was hacking the Panda Express Kung Pao chicken. in those recipe videos, all of those recipe videos, those live over on my YouTube channel. So if you have not checked out the YouTube channel yet, definitely hop over to YouTube, check some of that stuff out. We're also concurrently streaming on YouTube too, so if you haven't hopped over to YouTube yet, hop over, check some of that stuff out. That's also where all of the recipes live over on YouTube too. So if you're interested in reproducing anything that I'm cooking, pretty much everything that I cook on live stream is a recipe that I have written at some point. So if you want to cook what I'm cooking, definitely check out the recipe video. Those recipes tend to move a little bit slower and kind of talk my way through some of the decision making that goes behind what I do in a recipe and why I do certain things, why I don't do certain things, why I leave certain things out, stuff like that. Alright, so that's coming together very nicely. The vegetables of Kung Pao chicken are probably my favorite part because they're really bright and just visually very nice. I'm adding my chicken back to the wok yet, and finally my onions. So we're going to give this some time to come together. Real quick, we can pay attention to this. Pretty sure you can hear this. So if you're listening, you can definitely notice this when you're cooking on your own wok. But essentially what's happening, if you listen real carefully, is that our wok is not sizzling as aggressively and as loudly as it was earlier. So what that's a sign of is essentially what just happened was I just added a whole bunch of stuff to our wok. And when you add a whole bunch of stuff to a wok, the first thing that will happen is that it's going to start shedding heat very, very quickly. In our case, that's okay because there's nothing really cooking in our wok anymore. At this point, we're really just sauteing to combine at this point. But if at any point you do notice that happen and you're not done cooking, so if we still had something to cook and you notice that you're losing a lot of sizzling, you don't hear a lot of sizzling happening in your wok anymore, that's a sign that you have done something wrong and you're losing heat in a way that should not be happening. In our case, though, essentially what we're doing is just adding everything to the wok and then tossing to combine. So there's nothing that is aggressively cooking anymore, so that's okay. The last thing I'm adding, this is my sauce. One thing that I have gotten in the habit of doing with my wok stir fries is I like reserving the last couple of tablespoons of my sauce here. So there's maybe 2 or 3 tablespoons of sauce that I've reserved from our wok, or from my sauce here. And I like doing that because I like to reserve it and pay attention to how saucy is my wok stir fry. And if it needs it, I'll add it. But very, very frequently, I'll find myself reserving that last half or so and not adding it at all. And that's because lots of times we want to be very, very careful to make sure that we don't over sauce our stir fry. And we can do that by reserving the last bit, and if it needs it, you can add it, but if it doesn't need it, don't add it. I actually do think it needs it. So. Right, the very last thing that we're adding to our wok now is our cornstarch slurry. And you will notice that as soon as we add our cornstarch slurry to the wok, the sauce of our wok stir fry is going to start coming together very, very quickly. And that's because what our cornstarch slurry is essentially just a bunch of starch. So when you add that starch, it starts developing this nice, thick, and luxurious sauce. And that's kind of like the quality of sauce that we're probably most familiar with in wok stir fries. So as soon as you add that starch, you'll notice that our sauce is all suddenly coming together. Now we have this very thick and luxurious sauce. That's what we're looking for here, is that very, very thick sauce. So how much is a wok? Good question. So this wok, the wok that I'm cooking on comes from a restaurant supply store here in Oakland. So if you live in Oakland, I got mine at Chenko, and I think I got it for $10 or something like that. This is a very, very cheap wok. Mainly what we're looking for when you buy a wok is the quality of metal that it's made out of. So the wok that I'm cooking on today is made of carbon steel. Carbon steel is a great metal to make a wok out of because it has very, very high heat potential. It gets really, really hot. I've also seen lots of woks made out of stainless steel will work really, really great. I've seen iodized aluminum quite a bit too. I don't know how well that works on a wok. But you'll notice, one thing you'll notice is that a wok is very, very thin. So, and that is specifically because we use woks to get really, really hot. So because our wok is super thin, so you could take a look at mine right now, because it's empty. My wok is like literally just a very, very thin piece of carbon steel. So there's not even a bottom to it. So this wok is literally just a piece of carbon steel. Very, very different from your standard frying pan. A standard frying pan has a thick, heavy bottom to it. In a wok, we don't have that. So essentially what's happening is because that wok is so thin, it has the potential to heat up very, very quickly. So when you reheat a wok, so I'm about to reheat my wok right now. When you reheat your wok, or when you heat your wok up, it will come up to temperature within like under a minute. It will probably, you will have enough heat in your wok within like 30 to 45 seconds. What that also means is that it cools down very quickly. So that also means that your wok will go from like screaming hot to like pretty much cold to the touch within a minute. You could probably turn the fire off and that wok will drop temperature very, very quickly because it's so thin. In a standard frying pan, that won't happen. You'll probably take 4 to 5 minutes before it cools down enough to touch. So that means that it means two things. It means that it heats up very quickly. It also means that it cools down very quickly. So in order to work around that, we need really, really aggressive heat constantly. So I would say if you're in the market for a new wok, anything that has really, really high heat potential will work. So carbon steel, cast iron, aluminum, stainless steel, all of those things. Maybe not aluminum, but stainless steel works really great. But really what we're after, so like the reason that my woks work so well is because I've cooked on it for so long. So I love carbon steel because it develops a nice seasoning over time, similar to the way that cast iron does. So the more that you use it, the more seasoning that it has. So I've been using this wok for like almost a year now, and it has gotten this really, really nice thick seasoning to it. So if you look closely at the handle, see it? Yeah. So the handle is like bright silver. That's what the wok looked like when I first got it, and now it is like dark black. And that's because I've been cooking on it for like almost a whole year now. So that seasoning is what makes it so like slippery, has such a nice non-stick surface. It's just coming from the fact that it has been cooked on for a long time. So if you live in like a Chinatown area or like near an Asian market, most of those Chinatown areas will have some sort of store. If you don't live near Chenko, it will have some sort of store that like supplies cookware to the restaurants in the area. So if you live in a Chinatown district, there's got to be some kind of restaurant supply store that's supplying that cookware to the restaurants that are in that area. You can drop in and you'll probably find a wok like this for at least like maybe 10-15 bucks at the most. If you don't live near a Chinatown area, I have heard a lot of good things about the Joyce Chen wok, which works really great. I've cooked on a Joyce Chen wok before, and it works really great. Definitely get the carbon steel one. I would say if you're in the hunt for a wok, the only thing that we want to avoid are things like anything with a Teflon coating, because Teflon doesn't get very hot. And I don't even understand why they make woks with Teflon on it. But since Teflon doesn't get very hot, it prevents the wok from heating up to the temperature that you need to cook on. So if you have a Teflon wok, what's essentially going to happen is it's going to stop heating at a certain point because that Teflon is going to prevent the wok from heating past a certain point. That's what makes Teflon pans so good for things like soft scrambled eggs or like anything that's cooked on low or medium to low heat. Works really well on Teflon. Wok cooking does not ever work in medium to low heat unless you're like basically using your wok at the frying pan. So if you have a wok and it's non-stick, unfortunately it's probably not going to be a very good wok. And unfortunately in like lots of the big box stores I see woks with Teflon coatings all the time, and I honestly don't know why. How many attendees are needed for recipe? WSB. Tendies. Not sure what tendies is. Maybe chicken. I use three thighs of chicken. But really, I kind of just eyeball it. About a pound of chicken, I'd say. Looks delicious. Yeah, thank you. Let's plate this up. Oh, I gotta eat some on stream. Yeah, that's a good point. Everyone keeps reminding me to eat stuff on stream. Yeah, that is so good. This might be one of my favorite stir fries to make. It's like a little bit less effort than one of the deep fried dishes because you don't have to do the deep fry. And it just has so much flavor. It just, like all of that flavor is coming from like all of the different layers of things that we just did. So you can taste like probably the most immediate thing up front that you taste is that black bean paste, which is why I say when you use black bean paste, use that stuff really sparingly, maybe like 2 tablespoons, no more than 2 tablespoons in a whole stir fry. But then below that are all of those other layers of like fermentation and umami that we've been building out. So like the fermentation from the fish sauce, like all of that soy sauce, the brightness from the shaoxing, all of that stuff comes through really nicely. To me, like a wok stir fry is all about those like layers of flavor that you build up, and so like there's so much complexity that's coming from like those different like each consecutive layer of umami that we're building, all the way down to the garlic and ginger, which was the very first thing that we threw in. So that to me is like where umami comes from. It's not just about like something that's savory. It's something that like umami is all about like each step of the way. So you can taste like depth of flavor. That's what umami is about. It's not just like salty. It's not just savory. It's like each layer of flavor that's coming. What rice cooker do I use? Yeah. So today I'm cooking on a zojirishi. So if you've never seen a zojirishi, you could probably do it over here. Will this reach? Maybe not. Maybe I'll plug it. So zojirishi is this rice cooker. This is probably the rice cooker that you see all the time. They're really popular rice right now because they cook like really tender rice. It was really useful when I had a whole bunch of brown rice because brown rice is really difficult to get like a nice cook on because brown rice is really like stale. Brown rice is not very fluffy. So if you cook brown rice in a zojirishi rice cooker, it actually gets pretty fluffy. The problem with the zojirishi is that it takes a long time to cook rice. I think like when you do the brown rice, it probably takes like 2 hours or something to cook that brown rice. So if you have the foresight to put your rice on in the morning or in the afternoon, like several hours before you start cooking, the zojirishi is a good solution. Yeah, definitely, it's like the Cadillac of rice cookers. But because it takes so long, I also have another rice cooker. I think it's just like a cheap, I think it's like a Yamaha rice cooker or something. It's like one of those $5 rice cookers, and I find myself using that all the time because very frequently I'll forget to put the rice on in the morning, and then I like have to make rice within like basically the duration of time that I'm cooking, so like 45 minutes. And like a zojirishi, I have done this all the time where like I'll put rice on in the zojirishi and I'll finish the stir fry like literally an hour and a half before the rice is done, which is the worst if you like have finished stir fry but no rice to eat it with. So that's a real bummer. Let's plate this up. Yeah, totally. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Instapot rice cooking. Yeah, I know that lots of people use their Instapot for rice cooking. I have never really had good luck with it. Every time that I've tried to use my Instapot for rice cooking, I get kind of stale, kind of crunchy rice, sort of undercooked or maybe like not very fluffy rice. I've also only ever tried it on brown rice, so maybe I'm using the wrong kind of rice. But totally. Well, 4,000 watchers. Hello to everyone just joining. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time checking out these streams, we're streaming every Tuesday and Thursday at 6:30 p.m. PST, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST, and new recipe videos that come out every Friday. Today we did a Kung Pao chicken that is based off of a recipe that I had written hacking the Panda Express Kung Pao chicken, which is probably one of my favorite recipes that I've written so far, because essentially what we did is deconstructed the Panda Express Kung Pao chicken and kind of like took a look at what like are all of the American qualities that go into Panda Express's Kung Pao chicken, and then removed all of those American qualities and replaced them with like things that come from authentic Chinese cooking. So today, I think the big thing that we use today in today's Kung Pao chicken is the use of spicy black bean paste, which comes really commonly in like Chinese da jian mian. and it like essentially what we did is reconstructed a Chinese American classic as a like Chinese authentic Chinese dish, which technically Kung Pao chicken comes from like a lot of like really authentic cooking, but definitely like the Panda Express Kung Pao chicken is not very authentic. It's just pretty much just American food. So it's really interesting to deconstruct some of those stuff. I love doing that. I love that series because it's really interesting to deconstruct Chinese American food and kind of like look at like the food from my culture and like foods that I've been eating my whole life, and kind of like take a look at like which parts of the foods from my childhood are actually Chinese, and then which parts of those foods are really just American food. So when I look at things like, so we did a honey sesame chicken. That's the recipe that came out on Gift Recipe today. When we did that, essentially what I did was like removed a whole bunch of the honey in honey sesame chicken. I think I took the original Panda Express version for the honey sesame chicken. I think it has like half a cup of honey in it. And I removed all but like 4 or 5 tablespoons of that honey and replaced it with a couple of other things. So what I love doing when I remove honey is replacing it with sweet chili sauce, which is a very, very common thing in Chinese cooking. I think it actually comes from Vietnamese cooking, but it commonly found in Chinese cooking. It's essentially what it is the sweet and sour sauce that you eat with egg rolls. And I love using that as a replacement for honey because it's very, very similar in flavor and like texture to honey, but it's a little bit more complex in flavor, so there's more to it than just sweetness, and it's like a little bit more in the like the lane of like view and like cooking that you would get in Chinese cooking. So I love doing that. I love those recipes because they're super fun to do and like deconstruct Chinese food. So if you're interested in stuff like that, and if you're watching on Reddit, definitely hop over to the YouTube channel and check that series out. This recipe, along with many other recipes that we've done, are part of that series. I think that playlist is called Panda Express Hacks or something like that. So lots of stuff like that coming up over on the YouTube channel. Tomorrow is a Friday, so we have a recipe coming out. The recipe that we're doing tomorrow, someone was asking about this, is the Korean fried chicken sandwich from Shake Shack, which I'm super stoked for because lots of people have been asking me to do a Korean fried chicken, which I've always been super nervous about because fried chicken is a very like protected terrain. People are very territorial about how they fry their chicken. So I took a shot at how to do that Korean fried chicken. I don't know if I really nailed it. I did a tempura fried to the Korean fried chicken, which is definitely not how you Korean fried chicken, but it came out really good. So if you're interested in stuff like that, lots of new stuff coming up over on the YouTube channel very, very soon. It is also where we can currently live stream, so if you're paying attention, there's another laptop that's behind me. That would be the laptop that's streaming on YouTube. So on that stream, there's also a whole schedule of everything that I'm going to be cooking within the next couple of weeks. So I think the next 3 weeks of everything that I'm going to be cooking on stream live over there. So lots of stuff like that. If you want to find out what I'm going to be cooking next too, that's all lives over on YouTube. So definitely, if you're interested in checking some of that stuff out, check out all of that stuff. Lots of fun stuff coming up on YouTube very, very soon. What else? Yeah, so there's a whole series dedicated to Chinese American food. That's where this comes from. There's another series that we're doing that's dedicated to just reproducing foods from TV. So I did a whole series. I did a couple of things from the Legend of Korra TV series, probably because I was watching Legend of Korra at the time. So we did the sticky rice cakes and then the custard buns from Legend of Korra. And then I also did an egg tart recipe that was basically essentially the egg tarts from... That was the reason I did the egg tarts is because I was watching Avatar: The Last Airbender. So what is it? Yeah. So what we just cooked today is a Kung Pao chicken. This is a Kung Pao chicken that is loosely based off of the recipe that I had written, hacking the Panda Express Kung Pao chicken. That recipe, it lives over on the YouTube channel. So if you're watching on Reddit, that would be the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen. Lots of fun stuff coming up over on that YouTube channel. So if you haven't already, definitely hop over to YouTube, check some of that stuff out. If you're already there, thank you for checking it out. Thank you for tuning in. I love seeing people coming back all the time. I know I've seen a lot of people in the chat over on YouTube and on Reddit actually keep popping up. So it's always super fun to see so many people coming back. Super stoked to see so many people tuning in over and over again. So super cool. We're also working our way, we were working our way to 1,500 subscribers by the end of the month. I think we're well past 1,500 at this point. The last I checked, we were somewhere around 1,600. I think we're well past 1,600. But if you want to help us, we're probably going to aim, I'm going to aim for 2,000 by the end of next month. So if you want to help us hit 2,000, hop over to YouTube, check out some of that stuff. If you're interested in seeing that stuff, definitely subscribe. Don't subscribe if you're not interested in seeing that stuff because I don't want to spam you. Ooh, lots of questions. How come your rice sucks if it's been in the fridge? Yeah. Yeah, totally. So, Rootin' Tootin' and Hootin', that's a great username too. What happens when rice is left over? So the best way, or the only way that I've found of like keeping rice fresh overnight is keeping it on the hot plate of the rice cooker. And even then it doesn't really work really well. I think the only way that I've really had good success, or like moderate amounts of success keeping rice fresh overnight is in a zordorishi. That's the only time that I've ever managed to keep rice fresh overnight. Everything else after that, it just starts going stale. So as soon as you put that rice, or as soon as you take that rice off of the hot plate, even like within the span of a meal, it will go stale if you leave the top off of the rice cooker. So what's happening when you put your rice in the fridge is the cold temperatures of the refrigerator is pulling the moisture out of the rice. So the more moisture that leaves the rice, the more stale that it's going to get. So by the time that you pull it out the next morning, it's probably really, really stale. You could probably pick it up and like crumble it, because it's probably turned into like a block of rice at that point. So one thing that you can do if you're trying to save that rice is cover it in a paper towel. So this is a trick that lots of people do. Cover it in a wet paper towel and then reheat it in the microwave, and that will like return some of the moisture back to the rice. But the real truth is that when restaurants are reusing that rice, what they're doing is they use that leftover rice and they put that into fried rice. So if you have leftover fried rice, or if you have leftover rice that's been sitting in your refrigerator for a super long time, definitely use that to cook fried rice, because you actually can't make fried rice with fresh rice. So if you have leftover rice, make some fried rice. So if you've ever watched these streams before and you've seen me cooking fried rice, probably if you look back on the schedule, probably the thing that I cooked the night before was something that required fresh rice. So very often I'll do things like a kung pao chicken even, and then the next day I'll do like kimchi fried rice, or like bacon fried rice, some kind of fried rice. And that's because you can't make fried rice without leftover rice. If you try and use fresh rice with fried rice, what will happen is essentially what you're doing is dropping a whole bunch of moisture into your wok with that rice, because your rice is nice and fluffy. It has a lot of steam coming out of it, which is really great if you're trying to eat it. But if you're trying to cook with it, that's way too much moisture that goes into a wok. And what will happen is if you use fresh rice in a wok, it will drop a bunch of moisture in it, and then the temperature of your wok is going to suddenly disappear, and then you're going to get a really, really mushy fried rice. So if you've ever had mushy fried rice, that's because you were probably using fresh rice with it. So if you have leftover rice, don't eat it. Just make fresh rice, and if you have leftover rice, make some fried rice. Toss it in the wok, maybe throw an egg in it. If you're trying to keep it super simple, just throw an egg in it, maybe with like a sausage. Or maybe a little leftover ham, even lunch meat. Really throw whatever you have in the fridge into your fried rice and it will work out. If you're interested, there's actually a whole series dedicated to just fried rice over on the YouTube channel too, so that's super fun. I know that there's a couple of dishes that I've done. I've definitely done a crispy kimchi fried rice. There's a bacon fried rice. There's a Hawaiian fried rice that uses Spam. But like the general ethos of that series, hopefully the general takeaway of that series is that in fried rice, just throw whatever you have into it. Like that's the trick behind like all restaurant fried rice, is what you're eating. What you just paid $20 to eat in the restaurant is really just leftovers, because that's the only way to make fried rice, is just leftovers. So. Cool. I think I just caught everything. I don't know if I missed any questions. If I did miss a question, feel free to repeat your questions. I know I miss questions all the time because the chat moves really, really quickly, so I miss stuff all the time. But if I did miss a question, feel free to repeat it. As always, we're streaming every Tuesday and Thursday at 6:30 p.m. PST, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST, and then new recipes every Friday, usually a Friday morning in the PST time zone. So definitely hop over to YouTube and give that a subscribe if you want to check out the next couple of things that I'm going to be cooking. There's a whole schedule of everything that I'm going to be cooking. Very, very often I'll forget what I'm supposed to be cooking. I actually forgot that I was supposed to make a kung pao chicken today, so I had to go and get some chicken. So the YouTube channel has more information than even I have. I don't actually remember what the next thing I'm supposed to cook is. So if you're interested in checking out what I'm supposed to be cooking next, definitely hop over to YouTube and check that out. Spam fried rice not from Hawaii. Yeah. What makes Spam fried rice from Hawaii is because the Spam is all over Hawaii. In Hawaiian food, I've seen Spam in so many places that it just doesn't belong to. So actually, the next thing that I'm working on for the Hawaiian series is Spam musubi, and I actually don't really want to take a shot at any of like the really authentic Hawaiian food. So like even like poke, I'm really nervous about doing poke, or like any of the pigs. So like I think it's like lomi lomi tomato or lomi lomi pig. All of those things are things that are like passed down through generations. I'm really nervous. There's lots of stuff like that that I'm really nervous about. I'm really nervous about doing ramen. Because ramen broth is really, really hard to do. Even like noodles, neuromin, I'm really nervous about neuromin. I've been working on a recipe for neuromin, but it's really, really tricky. So lots of times some of the stuff that I'm planning are really, really scary because a lot of those things they're like family secrets. So. Homemake all the sauces, yeah, that's a good question, yeah. Yeah, you probably could do a whole series on that, or just like deconstruct a lot of the sauces. A lot of my sauces are like they like come from just like research and kind of like taking a look at like the way that other people assemble these dishes, and then kind of take a look at like what are the elements that I don't like that go into some of those sauces. So I don't remember what the original Kung Pao chickens that I was researching use. But I know for sure that this Kung Pao chicken, like almost every other recipe that I had seen for Kung Pao chicken, especially like the American ones, use rice vinegar. And I actually don't think rice vinegar in a Kung Pao chicken is the right choice because I don't think rice vinegar is bright enough to really punch through in a Kung Pao chicken. I think you need something like a little bit more sweet. So today what we used is black vinegar. If you don't have black vinegar, you can totally use rice vinegar. But I love using black vinegar in this dish because black vinegar has a little bit more sweetness. So black vinegar was one of the things that I swapped out for rice vinegar. I swapped the rice vinegar out for black vinegar to replace some of the sugar that I took out. So stuff like that, that's kind of like the thought process that goes behind a lot of the decision making in my recipes. So definitely, if you're interested in stuff like that, a lot of the recipe videos talk through some of that stuff. So if you're interested in kind of like diving into more of like the decision making behind a lot of the recipes that I write, definitely hop over to YouTube. Those videos, they tend to move a little bit slower and kind of like talk my way through some of the stuff that's going on in those recipes, like why I do certain things. So I definitely talked about in that video why I use black vinegar instead of rice vinegar today. A lot of that decision making that comes up in those videos. So definitely, if you haven't yet, hop over to YouTube, check out some of that stuff. Lots of fun stuff coming up on YouTube very, very soon too. Lots of people have been also asking about some of the music that's playing underneath my voiceover. The song that you're listening to right now is everything that plays underneath the voiceovers are beats that I write. So all of the beats that I write are beats. They're published under Woo Cooks Beats. So if you're looking for those beats, that's all under the Woo Cooks Beats channel. It's a fun sister channel that I just started. I think it has like 20 subscribers or something. It's brand new. But all of those beats, those live over on the Woo Cooks Beats channel, and there is actually I think the track that you're listening to right now is going to drop on Spotify next Friday. So lots of fun stuff coming up soon. All right, thanks everyone. I'll see you soon. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. I'll see you soon. Oh.